Hey guys, welcome to another episode of our TG Wellbeing series. I'm Dr. Victoria Munoz. This is Adam Santos. And today we're going to talk about testosterone and performance.
Yes, absolutely. We're back at it another
Back
week.
at it.
And having some great conversations, some great information that I've definitely received out of this. I know a lot of you guys have a lot of questions out there, so that's what we're trying to do. Answer these questions that everybody else might have as well. First thing, obviously, we're on the topic of testosterone, and I know it does, but how or what benefits do you get from athletic performance from testosterone?
Yeah, so let's back up a little bit and talk about what testosterone is. Testosterone is a hormone, and hormones are messengers. So what hormones do is once they are synthesized by certain cells, they go out into the bloodstream, and then they travel to other cells to do work or to give a message or to have some kind of a genetic action on that cell, right? So, for example, and I won't geek out too much on this, but testosterone is a product of, starts with the hypothalamus, right? The hypothalamus, what it does is it's a feedback loop, and it detects low levels of testosterone. So what it does is it releases GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone, which goes to the anterior pituitary gland to produce LH and FSH, which is luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. And I'm sure many of you have heard of these signaling messengers. So what happens is LH and FSH go to the gonads. For females, it'll be the ovaries. For men, it'll be the testes, right? And from there, testosterone is produced. The adrenals play a role in testosterone production too, but for the sake of this conversation, we'll just talk about the gonads. From there, once the testosterone is produced, testosterone enters the bloodstream and targets certain cells in the body. Pretty much targets every cell in the body to some extent, but the major players are the liver cells, brain cells, and the muscle cells, and bone as well. So when we're talking about athletic performance, we're mostly talking about muscle cells, even though the brain is a very primary player in that as well. Testosterone is actually a brain hormone because studies have been done on these particular lizards where they do this mating dance in the cage with the females, and their throat will turn red and they'll be dancing around the female. And then what they did is they went and castrated them, put them back in the cage with the female, and they did nothing until they took testosterone, they injected it in a certain part of the brain, and then this mating behavior came back. So the brain is a major player in testosterone and performance and how we behave, right? Wow. So testosterone, when it goes to the muscle cell and it is transported into the cell, from there it attaches to what's called a carrier protein. That carrier protein takes the testosterone into the nucleus of the cell where it targets certain genes to do certain things depending on the type of cell. So for muscle cells, what it does is targets genes to synthesize muscle tissue, to make the muscle stronger and more efficient, right? And also there's other things that are involved like oxygen carrying capacity of the mitochondria and so forth. So in the liver cell, it's responsible for production of protein synthesis, and the brain, cognition, mood, sex drive. Sex drive is very much a brain function, not necessarily a gonad function, even though they play well together, right? So when we look at it this way, and we look at the importance of testosterone, not only in our health and longevity, but in our performance, you start to understand the importance of testosterone and the role it plays in the human body.
Very interesting, and how you're saying, the brain seems to be a very big, maybe the primary organ that's affected, by the testosterone. But are there certain parts of the body then that are more affected by testosterone in general?
Yeah. So the major players are definitely the liver, the muscles, and the brain. But testosterone also plays a very important role in bone health as well. What happens is when testosterone levels go down, we start to see a decrease in bone density and strength, and so it makes both males and females more susceptible to osteoporosis, for example. Yeah. Also, erythropoiesis, which is the production of red blood cells, so it plays a major role on affecting the bone marrow where red blood cells are produced for the production of red blood cells, which we want, because those are the oxygen carriers of our blood that we require for life. If we don't have oxygen, we don't make ATP and we die. So very important, plays many roles in the human body, but those are the major players.
Interesting. And are there any, I mean, obviously the exogenous, testosterone can help tremendously with building these areas, benefiting these areas of the body. Of course, if somebody's low, but are there any specific lifestyle changes that people can do to naturally boost it? And with that, if somebody's tanked, say they're at 100 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone, is there anything they can do to boost that back into not just the normal range, but optimizing their body? Is that even possible?
Yeah, so that is an important part in testosterone replacement, is what's going on with you metabolically. So for example, the things that are working against us are diet, right? So we can improve our diet by moving more toward a carnivore diet. And you don't have to be 100% carnivore. 80% with a clean diet is good, but I guarantee you this chicken, rice, and veggie diet that these trainers have people on is not helping their hormone profile at all. So carnivore diet, you want red meat and you want saturated fat. Saturated fat is the prime player in the production of cholesterol. Cholesterol is where it all starts with hormone production. We need LDL. There are actually LDL receptors on the cells, which are the starting point for the production of testosterone. So if we don't have a good cholesterol profile or lipid profile, then our own natural production of testosterone goes down. Another thing is hormesis, shocking the body. Gary Brecka says, and I might not quote it exactly the way he says it, but aging is a product of comfort. And I know he says it a little bit differently than that, but I agree with this, because the more comfortable we get and the less we challenge ourselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, the quicker we age. Some therapies that we could participate in are like cold plunge, hot cold like contrast therapy, hot cold ending with cold. Exercise is very hormetic, especially if it's like HIIT or weight training that's more anaerobic. So these are things that we could do for ourselves to help challenge ourselves physiologically, and this actually boosts the production of testosterone. In fact, cold boosts it kind of indirectly in that what happens that after you've had a cold application, and we don't mean adaptation, right? Hormetic means you're shocking the body and then you remove the stressor, right? So when we're doing cold therapy, we don't want to be in a cold plunge for hours on end, right? We just want to do like 3 to 6 minutes and get out. And then what we're doing is we're producing more natural killer cells, which boosts the immune system. And then afterward, though, there's a cold reaction to the vascular system where it constricts. There's a rebound reaction, which we want, which helps to dilate the vascular system, which causes more blood to circulate to these different tissues, carrying the testosterone to these tissues to do more work. So hormesis, diet, getting our cholesterol up, improving our sleep. Sleep is really important because we produce hormones when we sleep. Human growth hormone is a big one. There's people that pay $1,000 to $3,000 a month for human growth hormone injections. Well, we can boost it naturally just through sleep alone. We can measure it through a biomarker called IGF-1, and this is something we can run in a lab, because you can't measure human growth hormone directly simply because it's released in a pulsatile fashion into the blood. So at any given moment in time, the levels will fluctuate or be undetectable. But IGF-1 is what's produced as a result of our human growth hormone levels over time, and that's how we can measure it. So we've actually measured the production of human growth hormone not only with hormesis, but with improving sleep quality. Additionally, moving the body is really important. Now, how you move the body is going to be key in how we produce testosterone. For example, anaerobic training is going to boost testosterone. Aerobic training does not. In fact, aerobic training will work against your testosterone production, and I'm going to explain why. So when you do weight training and HIIT, for example, And I'm not going to go into the definition of HIIT, but it's, you know, it's spurts of all-out effort, you know, repeatedly. What we're doing is we're not only boosting our own testosterone production, but we're also releasing what's called myokines. These myokines go into the blood. They go to every muscle in the body, telling it to get stronger. So myokines play a major role in helping the production of testosterone as well. Now, when we do long endurance type activities, and studies have shown that any activity over 75 minutes actually starts working against our testosterone production. And that is because what happens is we start to produce what's called cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And testosterone and cortisol are both produced from cholesterol. So here's cholesterol at the top of the pathway. And what are we going to do? Are we under stress? Yes. So what happens is we start producing more cortisol. Testosterone gets less of attention in that scenario, right? But when we're doing short bursts of activity like anaerobic, weight training, HIIT training, then our body's not necessarily under stress. It doesn't detect stress necessarily. What it's doing is it's getting a signal saying, I got to get stronger and I got to be able to do this over and over again. So I'm going to produce more testosterone in order to accommodate that. And myokines are also a player in that. So you will get stronger and faster as a result of doing anaerobic training. Now, another interesting point with weight training is that working to failure doesn't necessarily boost your testosterone better. And it's that stress factor. So when you work just before you get to the point where you need to do those last 3 reps, for example, for failure, that's when you get the best testosterone production. So I've done videos on my channel about, I do a lot of weight training and exercise videos. And one of my videos, I mentioned that I didn't go to failure in that particular workout session. And that's why, because if you have sessions where you're not going to failure, but you're working just to the point where you could do 3 more sets, that's when your testosterone is best optimized. Because you're not triggering those stress hormones. When you go to failure, you are triggering those stress hormones. Now, there's benefits to that. You want to kind of alternate it, right? Because the benefit is that you're tearing up the muscle cells that much more, which means they have to repair. And kind of from the back end, you're producing more testosterone, increasing that muscle mass and so forth. But you need both. You need to work just up to the point of failure, but not to failure. You need to have those sessions. Plus, you need to have these sessions where you work to failure, where you're really tearing up the muscle and you're having to take a day or 2 to recover. So they both work really well together, but all in all, that's the best way to produce testosterone through our physical activity. Now, you do get these guys that are having a hard time, and women that are having a hard time getting to the point where they can even get a good workout in the gym. That's because their testosterone levels are already so low that they're just struggling to even make it through a workout. So it kind of works hand in hand, right? We do want to produce our own natural testosterone, but if it's so low that we're struggling, you're not going to get there because you can't put the effort in to do it.
No, I find it fascinating too, the anaerobic versus aerobic training. You know, when I went to school, you know, kinesiology is what my degree is, and I remember a class I was on, an exercise physiology class. What really made sense in my mind was our instructor made us look at 100-meter sprinters, Olympic 100-meter sprinters, and marathon runners. Same amount of nutrients, eating similar calories, you know, but you have somebody doing 100-meter sprints, maybe up to 400-yard dashes to train for it. You have somebody doing 28, 29 miles, you know, 30 miles, whatever, for training. You look at the body differences. And I remember looking into the testosterone on average was always higher for the sprinters as well. And it's just kind of fascinating that you're bringing that up. But I guess my question is, there are, you know, immune benefits, my understanding, to aerobic training as well, you know, health benefits to it as well. But if somebody's trying to optimize testosterone, optimize strength, optimize their muscle mass, should aerobic training be eliminated, or should that still be, you know, a part in it?
Well, I can't answer that directly. So let's talk about different scenarios and where patients are when they start an exercise program. So I've gotten patients that are just never exercised a day in their life. They've got such metabolic dysfunction. They're overweight. They may have heart disease, diabetes, these kinds of things. I'm not going to start them on a HIIT program. You know, I'm going to start them just walking and just getting movement in their body, because they're going to get injured if they go right from 0 to 60, right? So yeah, any kind of movement for the patient or the individual is important. Stretching, a stretching routine can really help too. Staying limber and flexible throughout your lifetime, it is as important as maintaining lean muscle tissue throughout your lifetime, because muscle is metabolic. So as our muscle mass decreases, our metabolic function goes down, our lifespan shortens, we're more susceptible to chronic disease, and just the list goes on. We just are on a very slow or maybe fast decline, depending, right? So getting people moving, sometimes that's the goal, but our ultimate goal is to get them to do anaerobic training. And so if we can get them doing eventually some lightweight workouts and using proper technique, of course. See people going into the gym trying to figure it out themselves, and they've never lifted weight in their life and they end up injured. So working with qualified trainers is important, which we have those here at TG the gym. We have qualified trainers that really know what they're doing. And then eventually get into HIIT. HIIT is the mother of all workouts. I would say that HIIT would get you better results than even weight training, even though they're both right in there. And I wouldn't trade one for the other, because personally I do both. I just don't do HIIT year round. I cycle my HIIT in and out, but I weight train year round. So that's kind of what I do personally. And I see the best results with my patients that move into that kind of pattern of training. But just moving your body. You know, if I can get somebody walking and then going out for a light jog, I'm happy. Because they're going to start seeing some metabolic improvement. They're going to start seeing their diabetes improve. Cardiovascular risk levels go down, and other things as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then, so, on the topic of testosterone, obviously that's what we're trying to primarily cover here. Last week, we spoke a little bit on supplementation and how kind of learned there's not really any natural test booster that really helps. But are there specific nutrients or specific foods that we can be eating that can increase that natural production of testosterone?
Absolutely. So there are vitamins that are players along the production of the hormone, along these pathways. So vitamin D is very important. It's actually a prohormone. Vitamin D is not a vitamin. It's actually a prohormone, or sometimes you can call it a prehormone, which it plays an integral role in the production of all other hormones. Plus our immune health. People tend to get sick less when their vitamin D levels are optimized. And then zinc. Zinc's a very important nutrient for the production of testosterone, and so is magnesium. Now, vitamin D and magnesium, I see a lot of deficiencies in these, simply because we're not spending 85% of our time outside every day, which by human design we should be, in order to get adequate amounts of vitamin D, and living in a sunny environment, right? A lot of people don't. And then magnesium is also very deficient because a lot of our micronutrients are deficient as a result of soil being depleted in every corner of the earth, practically. So what I like to do is I like to make sure that my patients supplementally get a good vitamin D3 with K2, and also an electrolyte with magnesium in it. Now, zinc, I rarely supplement that. I will supplement it if it's flu season and people want to boost their immunity, because zinc has a very strong role in preventing viral infections, for example. I might recommend that people take like 15 to 30 milligrams of zinc around flu season, for example, but it's not something that you should necessarily supplement year round. Now, cholesterol, again, we've talked about cholesterol a lot. I drive it home every time we talk about testosterone, because it's very important for our natural production of testosterone. And ideally, we want to produce as much natural testosterone as we can. Okay, TRT is great. It has many great benefits, and that's testosterone replacement therapy. So giving it exogenously, definitely indicated if you can't get your levels up to where they need to be, to where you're feeling your best. But we want to optimize ourselves metabolically in order to get our body to do its own work. And then what we do supplementally is an additive to that just gives us optimization and the best health outcome.
That's interesting. And with testosterone, one of the things you mentioned, well, you talk about HGH and IGF-1, with sleep per se, but you mentioned, good sleep, adequate sleep. It's not just sleeping, but other than sleep, because I know that's definitely crucial for HGH production, I'd imagine testosterone as well. But is there anything that people tend to do on a regular basis, maybe unknowingly, that's reducing their ability to naturally create testosterone at the level it needs to be?
Yeah, so it's almost like the opposite of everything you're doing right.
Yeah.
Like your diet is huge, and plant-based diets are not what's making us healthy. Even if you're eating clean plant-based diets, it's not helping our hormone profile or neurotransmitters or anything. In fact, it's doing more damage to the gut. So a meat-based diet is the best thing with the saturated fat. If you ate no other fat but saturated fat, you'd be your healthiest, because these plant oils are not actually, well, they don't come from plants.
Yeah.
They're industrial grease is what they are. And we've been told to consume it because it's healthier, it's heart healthy. It's not heart healthy. What's heart healthy is saturated fat. What's not heart healthy is these seed oils and carbohydrates and sugar, which is increasing the inflammation in our body, right? That's causing us to be metabolically sick. And inflammation is a big player in the reduction of our production of testosterone. So whether it's acute inflammation or chronic inflammation, they both play a role against the production of testosterone. So for example, if you have the flu, your testosterone is temporarily going to go down a little bit. And that is because of the inflammatory markers, IL-6. Interleukin-6 is a big player in that. And it's released whenever we have like an illness, like the flu or COVID or something like that. And also chronic inflammation over time, which is a result primarily of our diet. Can be other things too, like chronic stress. There's other players, but diet is a primary contributor to chronic inflammation in the body. When we have this chronically inflamed system, testosterone it can't optimize itself. And so by removing the inflammation from our body, by optimizing our health through a proper diet, it's been proven genetically that we are meant to eat fatty red meat. That's what we're meant to eat. We're not omnivores, we're not herbivores, we're obligate carnivores. And that is it. And that's all I'm going to say about that right now. But by eating a proper diet, we improve our lipid profile, which improves our hormone production, which also improves our gut health, which reduces inflammation. And just all in all, we have a better health outcome, including the production of hormones. Because, if you think about it, if you optimize yourself, you don't have to think about every little thing that's going on inside the body. It takes care of itself, right? Including hormones. Another thing is chronic stress, of course. We talked about how cortisol and testosterone are both produced from cholesterol. So if we're under chronic stress, now not temporary stress, like you're running from something that wants to eat you, or hormesis, like we talked about, actually works for the benefit of our testosterone production. We're talking chronic stress over time where you're in a bad relationship, your business isn't going well, you just need to make some changes in your life. I recommend doing it, making those changes and taking that risk to get yourself in a better position so that you have a better just life outcome, right? So chronic stress will definitely work against the production of our testosterone.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And a couple things that you were saying, with testosterone, healthy diet, inflammation in the body, better than anybody else. When I was dealing with my gallbladder issues, gallstones, inflammation in the body, testosterone wasn't optimized. And in combination with working with you on TRT, working with you on diet, I'm doing probably 80% or more carnivore. So I agree with you, 80% at least, which was kind of weird to wrap my mind around because where I came from, protein, carbs, vegetables, like that was my whole life. But I definitely feel better, overall. But I guess a question I have, I came to you with gallbladder issues, inflammation, a lot of stuff going on. And obviously you optimized me. I'm feeling very healthy now. But what about somebody with like cardiovascular disease, cancers, things of that nature? Is TRT going to be safe for that kind of a person?
Yeah, so you'll get a different message from the conventional medical arena that you'll get from somebody like me who specializes in metabolic health. I'll tell you right now, MDs do not specialize in metabolic health. They know nothing about it. They barely remember the mitochondria mentioned in medical school, and that is it. Every single day I'm addressing mitochondrial function, every day. So let's debunk these myths, okay? Cardiovascular disease is not caused by hormones, and it's not caused by cholesterol, okay? It's caused by inflammation. It's caused by triglycerides, high triglycerides, which are a product of the carbohydrates and sugars in our diet. Alcohol plays a role in this too. We're not going to touch too much on alcohol, but it can definitely tank your testosterone because alcohol will cause your estradiol to go up. And men do need estradiol, but not in the levels that they're going to get with drinking alcohol. So it's not a manly drink for sure. It's a girly drink. So studies have shown that patients with cardiovascular disease actually improve with TRT. And the reason for this is because testosterone is an anti-inflammatory hormone, so it brings inflammation down. But you have to think of what testosterone does. What does it do? It causes muscle cell synthesis, which improves metabolic function, which helps to improve insulin sensitivity, which we want. We don't want insulin resistance. A lot of these patients have comorbidities. They don't only have cardiovascular disease, but they have diabetes, and they have obesity, and they have visceral fat. All these things are playing into their health outcome, which isn't good, right? By giving testosterone or optimizing it through lifestyle and also through TRT, but we'll just focus on TRT for a minute because there's the word out there that TRT can exacerbate cardiovascular disease. Well, that's not actually true because, like I said, testosterone plays an integral role in improving our metabolic function by increasing muscle mass, by cleaning up the mitochondria as a secondary effect, and improving our mood, helping us to make better choices. So all in all, testosterone doesn't affect cardiovascular disease in a negative way. Actually, it can help improve the disease, okay? In terms of cancer, we touched on this a little bit last week, but testosterone does not cause prostate cancer. I could stop there because it absolutely does not cause prostate cancer. What happens is, once prostate cancer is detected, we see higher levels of testosterone, and a lot of that is DHT. So the cancer cells will cause the prostate cells to produce increased levels of testosterone, which ultimately converts more into DHT, and that is the problem. That's the problem. And then what it does is it feeds the cancer and helps it grow. So what we would not do in the case of prostate cancer, for example, is give TRT. We would stop it during that time until the patient is cleared. But here's the caveat. Once the patient is cleared and cancer-free, you definitely want to start their testosterone replacement therapy again. It's not because it didn't cause the cancer to begin with. So, cancer is a metabolic disease. It's not genetic. When you have the right doctor that's fixing the metabolic problem that caused the cancer in the first place, then you get the best outcome, right? You don't have a repeat of that cancer coming back. And the TRT is absolutely indicated, absolutely, and will help to improve a patient's health outcome. One thing that many clinics will do is chemical castration to these patients. What they'll do is they'll give them medications to suppress their testosterone for a lifetime.
Wow.
And they have no quality of life. In fact, some of these patients, I'm not a urologist, but I have urologist friends who've had these patients come to them and say, Doc, I don't even care if I die tomorrow. I have no quality of life. I can't live like this. They get them back on the TRT, and guess what? Not only do their markers improve, but their longevity and their health outcome improves as well. So it absolutely does not cause cancer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's very, very good information. And I'm sure a lot of you out there, may have had this question, or curiosity on this, because I've heard probably what most people hear, that it does lead or it can cause cancer, for example. And I guess with that, obviously everybody who comes to you for testosterone is going to be on different dosing, whether male, female, or say two males with the same exact level of naturally occurring testosterone. How do you know how to dose, somebody, different people? How do you know how much to dose them and get them to where they need to be?
Yeah, so it's very individualized. And because there are certain markers of testosterone, like testosterone attaches to an androgenic receptor on the cell, and there's no way to test that saturation. So cells will become saturated with testosterone as a result of this receptor, but we can't measure it. So we can look at sex hormone binding globulin. We can see how much is bound and how much is free. What we need is about 1 to 3% of free testosterone at all times. That's enough. The bound is just simply there for when we need it. And so there's 2 ways that testosterone is bound in the blood. Sex hormone binding globulin, which is very tight, it holds tightly to the testosterone, and then albumin, which holds on to testosterone more loosely. So if the blood is circulating, albumin is circulating past a cell that needs testosterone, it will release it to that cell. Sex hormone binding globulin, not so much, but it knows when to release it and why. So there's that. Inflammation can drive that mechanism up too, so that it's not releasing it enough, and then your free levels go down. So we can look at certain markers in the blood to determine what your body's doing as opposed to somebody else that may have the same natural levels. Another important thing to look at is the symptoms that the patient is presenting with. You might have one patient that comes in with a level of 600, which, 700 to 1,000 is what I would consider a good total range for men. Somebody might come in with 600 and feel really good, optimized. Well, he's probably metabolically healthy.
Yeah.
And so his cells are responding real well to not only natural production of testosterone, but in receiving the testosterone once it's produced, right? Somebody else with 600 might feel horrible, and they're not very metabolically healthy.
Yeah.
And so we do have to go by symptoms. We have to look at everything that's playing into hormone production and the patient's health in order to know exactly how to prescribe testosterone. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah.
And not just any doctor can do this.
Yeah.
Just because you went to medical school doesn't mean you know how to prescribe a medication of any kind, especially a hormone.
And then, so another question off of that, and I don't know if this is a thing, I'm going to use maybe a bad example, bad analogy right now, but I'm not really a drinker, but some people can drink alcohol the first time they drink. One drink gets them buzzed. Then it takes more and more and more over their time of drinking. Is that the same for TRT? Would somebody over the years need to keep increasing the TRT dosing to be in that optimized range? And if so, does it ever get to a point where it could be like an unhealthy area to be with their exogenous testosterone?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And it doesn't really work that way with the human body. So we've talked about metabolic health, and getting the patient metabolically healthy is really important, because naturally we produce testosterone. It's a feedback loop. So the hypothalamus will detect low levels, and then it goes through this whole mechanism that we talked about in the beginning of this interview, and causes the gonads, for example, to produce more testosterone. Well, so it's a check and balance. The body likes to stay in homeostasis, and so naturally we'll just keep producing the same amounts over a lifetime if we stayed metabolically healthy and metabolically the same. It doesn't really work that way naturally, though we can optimize our metabolic health over our lifetime. There might be a minor decline, like maybe at age 100, you might start seeing a decline, but that's not what we're seeing in the human species today, right? So improving metabolic health, yes, is important. And with that, with the TRT, you're going to get a better outcome. You're not going to need to keep increasing the dose or anything like that. Now, in the beginning of testosterone replacement therapy, the patient isn't metabolically healthy, and I will often work with patients on both ends. So, okay, you've got all this metabolic dysfunction going on in your body, yet your testosterone's at 200. We're not going to wait to get that optimized. We're going to start optimizing that while we improve your health, right? So we'll start giving TRT. Low and slow is always important. That's what prevents the side effects. That's what prevents the increased production of estradiol. That's what prevents the increased production of DHT and other things that can come about as a result, including hematocrit going up. You know why hematocrit goes up with these people? Because the doctors are not dosing it properly. And so they've got patients from these TRT clinics, they're all going and donating blood. Why? Because the doctors are not prescribing it properly. So it takes a good 6 months, and you want to slowly optimize them over a 6-month period. Now, sometimes I'll start a guy with 0.5 of a 200 milligram per mil dose, and he'll just stay there. And then others, we need to increase it. But then as we optimize their metabolic function, we can start lowering the dose. So your body does keep producing its own testosterone, even if we're giving TRT. It's when people are taking tremendous amounts of anabolics where we see the suppression of their own natural testosterone. Yeah, so it's very individual, but no, we should not have to keep increasing the dose over time. We should be able to give them a certain amount, and they should pretty much stay there. There might be some slight fluctuations, but there are naturally in our human body. So that's to be expected, but it's not something that your body gets used to and has to keep getting more and more of.
That's very, very fascinating, very informative. As always, Dr. Victoria, I never leave these podcasts, these meetings without learning something. So thank you so much. I hope all of you who are watching this, have some good takeaways. And, you definitely got to come see her. She knows what she's doing. So thank you, Victoria.
Yeah, and I want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
I'm turning 60 this year. I don't usually talk about my personal experience in medicine, but I'm turning 60 this year, and I'm starting a series called Biohack Your Life, so you might want to tune into that. My metabolic health is absolutely phenomenal, and as a result of the things I've done to reach the age of 60 and be so metabolically healthy, I want to also teach others how to do the same. So definitely tune in to the podcast, definitely tune into that series, definitely come here every week on Tuesdays for our TG Wellbeing podcast. And like always, thanks for being here. I'm Dr. Victoria Munoz. This is Adam Santos, and see you next time.
See you next time. Boom.
Boom.